All right, we're back. Chapter 2, The Law of Influence. The true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. What do leaders look like? Do they always look powerful, impressive, charismatic? And how do you measure the effectiveness of a leader? Can you put two people side by side and instantly tell which is the better leader? There are questions people have asked for hundreds of years. These are questions people have asked for hundreds of years. One of the most effective leaders of the late 20th century was anything but impressive upon first appearance. When most people think of Mother Teresa, they envision a frail little woman dedicated to serving the poorest of the poor. That she was, but she was also a tremendous leader. I say that because she had an amazing amount of influence with others, and if you don't have influence, you will never be able to lead others. Now, that's the first page of chapter 2. We about to get into some more. Small stature, big impact. Lucinda Varday, who worked with Mother Teresa on the book A Simple Path, described the nun as the quintessential energetic entrepreneur who has perceived a need and done something about it, built an organization against all odds, formulated its constitution, and sent out branches all over the world. The organization Mother Teresa founded and led is called the Missionaries of Charity. While other vocational orders in the Catholic Church were declining, hers grew rapidly, reaching more than 4,000 members during her lifetime, not including numerous volunteers. Under her direction, her followers served in 25 countries on 5 continents. In Calcutta alone, she established a children's home, a center for people with leprosy, a home for people who were dying and destitute, and a home for people suffering with tuberculosis or mental disorders. That kind of organizational building can be accomplished only by a true leader. Mother Teresa's impact reached far beyond her immediate environment. People from all walks of life and from nations around the globe respected her. When she spoke, people listened. Author and former presidential speechwriter Peggy Noonan wrote about a speech Mother Teresa gave at the National Prayer Breakfast in 1994. It illustrated her level of influence with others. Noonan observed, all the Washington establishment were there, plus a few thousand born-again Christians, Orthodox Catholics, and Jews. She spoke of God, of love, of families. She said we must love one another and care for one another. There were great purrs of agreement. But as the speech continued, it became more pointed. She asked, do you do enough to make your parents in the old people's homes feel your love? Do you bring them each day your joy and caring? The baby boomers in the audience began to shift in their seats, and she continued, I feel that the greatest destroyer of peace today is abortion, she said, and then she told them why in uncompromising terms. For about 1.3 seconds, there was complete silence. Then applause built and swept across the room, but not everyone. The president and the first lady, Bill and Hillary Clinton, the vice president and Mrs. Gore looked like seated statues at Madame Tussauds, moving, not a muscle. Mother Teresa didn't stop there either. When she was finished, there was almost no one she had not offended. If just about any other person in the world had made those statements, people's reactions would have been openly hostile. They would have booed, jeered, or stormed out. But the speaker was Mother Teresa. She was probably the most respected person on the planet at that time, so everyone listened to what she had to say, even though many of them violently disagreed with what she said. In fact, every time Mother Teresa spoke, people listened. Why? She was a real leader, and when a real leader speaks, people listen. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Leadership is not. Leadership is often misunderstood. When I began offering leadership conferences in the 1970s, I had a difficult time getting people to show up. Back then, if people had a title or a leadership position, they said, I don't need to come and learn about leadership. I'm already a leader. They thought they'd arrived. At the time, people who didn't have a position or a title would say, I'm not a leader, meaning they didn't have a position, so I don't need to come. They didn't understand that becoming a leader was a process someone can pursue. I talk more about this in The Law of Process, some chapters down. To counter this mindset, I began teaching the 5 levels of leadership, though back then I call it the 5 levels of influence, to help people understand that position is the lowest level of leadership, that the starting point True leadership cannot be awarded, appointed, or assigned. It comes only from developing influence, and that cannot be mandated. It must be earned. The 5 levels of leadership is a roadmap for that process. The only thing a title can buy is time, either to increase your level of influence with others or to undermine it. When people recognize that, they become open to how leadership actually works. Today, people sometimes have a different misconception about leadership. When they hear me say leadership is influence, they confuse influence with popularity. You can have a high profile career on television, music, or movies, or you can have millions of followers on social media and thousands of likes on your posts, but that doesn't make you a leader. It makes you popular. And that's not the same thing. People can be highly interested in someone with social influence, but that doesn't become leadership influence until the people following them change their behavior and take action as a result of the interaction with the influencer. That's the type of influence I'm describing when I say that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. 5 myths about leadership. Through the years, I've encountered many other misconceptions and myths people embrace about leadership and leaders. I want to share with you 5 common ones. The management myth. A widespread misunderstanding is that leading and managing are one and the same. Up until a few decades ago, books that claimed to be on leadership were often really about management. The main difference between the two is that leadership is about influencing people to follow, while management focuses on maintaining systems and processes. As former Chrysler chairman and CEO Lee Iacocca Riley commented, sometimes even the best manager is like the little boy with the big dog waiting to see where the dog wants to go. The best way to determine whether a person can lead rather than just manage is to ask him to create positive change. Managers can maintain direction, but often they can't change it. Systems and processes can only do so much. To move people in a new direction, you need influence. Number 2, the entrepreneur myth. Frequently, people assume that all entrepreneurs are leaders, but that's not always the case. Entrepreneurs are skilled at seeing opportunities and going after them. They see needs and understand how to meet them in a way that produces a profit, but not all entrepreneurs are good with people. Many find it necessary to partner with someone skilled at the people part of the equation. If they can't influence people, they can't lead. Number 3, the knowledge myth. Sir Francis Bacon said, knowledge is power. If you believe power to be the essence of leadership, then you might naturally assume that those who possess knowledge and intelligence are therefore leaders. That isn't necessarily true. You can visit any major university and meet brilliant research scientists and philosophers whose ability to think is so high that it's off the charts, but whose ability to lead is so low that it doesn't even register on the charts. Neither IQ nor education necessarily equates to leadership. Number 4, the pioneer myth. Another misconception is that anyone who is out in the forefront of the crowd is a leader. But being first isn't always the same as leading. For example, Sir Edmund Hillary was the first man to reach the summit of Mount Everest. Since his historic ascent in 1953, hundreds of people have followed him in achieving that feat. But that doesn't make Hillary a leader. He wasn't even the official leader on the expedition when he reached the summit. John Hunt was. And when Hillary traveled to the South Pole in 1958 as a part of the Commonwealth Trans-Antarctic Expedition, he was accompanying another leader, Sir Vivian Fush. To be a leader, a person has to not only be out front, but also have people intentionally coming behind him, following his lead and acting on his vision. Being a trendsetter is not the same as being a leader. Number 5, the position myth. As mentioned earlier, the greatest misunderstanding about leadership is thinking it is based primarily on position. It's not. If you've ever declined to follow a bad boss, or if you've ever been appointed to a position on a team or committee and people didn't listen to your advice, a position only gives you a chance. Stanley Hufty affirmed, it's not the position that makes the leader, it's the leader that makes the position. Who's the real leader? There was a game show on television that began when I was a kid and is currently in its 6th iteration called To Tell the Truth. Here's how it works. At the opening of the show, 3 contestants claim to be the same person. One of them is telling the truth. The other 2 are actors. A panel of celebrity judges take turns asking 3 people questions. And when time is up, each panelist guesses which person is the real truth teller. Many times the actors bluff well enough to fool the panelists and members of the audience. When it comes to identifying a leader, that task can be much easier. Don't listen to the claims of the person professing to be the leader. Don't examine credentials. Don't check titles. Check for influence. The proof of leadership is found in the followers. I personally learned the law of influence when I accepted my first job out of college. I went in with all the right credentials. I had the proper college degree. I had a great deal of insight into the work because of training given to me by my father. I possessed the position and the title of a leader in the organization. It made for a good looking resume, but it didn't make me the real leader. At my first board meeting, I quickly found out who the real leader was, a farmer named Claude. When he spoke, people listened. When he made a suggestion, people respected it. When he led, others followed. If I wanted to make an impact, I would have to influence Claude. He, in turn, would influence everybody else. It's the law of influence at work. Leadership is. The true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. If you watch the dynamics that occur between people in just about every aspect of life, you will see some people leading and others following. If you're a student of leadership, you begin to notice the leaders. They stand out, and position of or title often have little to do with who is really in charge. That being the case, why do people emerge as leaders while others can't influence people no matter how hard they try? I believe that several factors will determine your level of influence. Character, who you are. True leadership always begins with the inner person. That's why someone like Billy Graham was able to draw more and more followers to him as time went by. People could sense the depth of his character. Influence begins with who you are. Relationships, who you know. You're a leader only if you have followers, and that always requires a development of relationships. The stronger the relationships, the greater the potential for leadership. In my career, each time I entered a new leadership position, I immediately worked to start building relationships. Build enough of the right kinds of relationships with the right people, and you can become the real leader in an organization. Knowledge, what you know. Information is vital to a leader. You need a grasp of the facts, an understanding of dynamic factors and timing, and a vision for the future. Knowledge alone won't make someone a leader, but without knowledge, no one can become one. Whenever I was new to an organization, I would spend a lot of time doing homework before I tried to take the lead. Intuition, what you feel. Leadership requires more than just a command of data. It demands an ability to deal with numerous intangibles. In fact, that is often one of the main differences between managers and leaders. Leaders seek to recognize and influence intangibles such as energy, morale, timing, and momentum. Experience, where you've been. The greater the challenges you face as a leader in the past, the more likely followers are to give you a chance to lead in the present. Experience doesn't guarantee credibility, but it encourages people to give you a chance to prove that you are capable. Past success, what you've done. Nothing speaks to followers like a good track record. When I accepted my first leadership position, I had no track record. I couldn't point to past successes to help people believe in me. But by the time I went to my second position, I possessed a positive track record. Every time I extended myself, took a risk, and succeeded, followers had another reason to trust my leadership ability and to listen to what I had to say. Ability, what you can do. The bottom line for followers is what a leader is capable of accomplishing. They want to know whether that person can lead their team to victory. Ultimately, that's the reason people will listen to you and acknowledge you as their leader. As soon as they no longer believe you can deliver, they will stop listening and following. Leadership without leverage. If you want to test your ability to lead through influence alone, try leading in an organization of volunteers. Why do I say that? Because in volunteer organizations, there is no leverage. There is no rank or title to fall back on. There is no pay to withhold. There are no benefits or perks. Employees are pretty cooperative when their livelihood is at stake. But in voluntary organizations, the thing that works is leadership in its purest form, influence. Psychologist Harry A. Overstreet observed the very essence of all power to influence lies in getting the other person to participate. Followers in voluntary organizations cannot be forced to get on board. If the leader has no influence with them, then they won't follow. Recently, at a meeting where I was speaking to a group of company presidents and CEOs, one participant asked for advice on finding the best leaders in the organization. My advice was to ask candidates to lead in a volunteer organization for 6 months. If those leaders can get people to follow whom then when they have no leverage, then you know that they can influence others. That is the mark of a true leadership ability. From commander to private to commander in chief. One of my favorite stories that illustrates the law of influence concerns Abraham Lincoln. In 1832, decades before he became president, young Lincoln gathered a group of men to fight in the Black Hawk War. In those days, the person who put together a volunteer company for the militia often became its leader and assumed a commanding rank. In this instance, Lincoln was given the rank of captain. He had no prior military experience and he knew nothing about tactics. He had trouble remembering the simplest military procedures. For example, one day Lincoln was marching a couple of dozen men across the field and needed to guide them through a gate into another field, but he couldn't figure out how to do it. Recounting the incident later, Lincoln said, "I could not for the life of me remember the proper word of command for getting my company endwise. Finally, as he became near the gate, I shouted, 'This company is dismissed for 2 minutes when it will fall in again on the other side of the gate.'" As time went by, Lincoln's level of influence with others in the militia actually decreased. While other officers proved themselves and gained rank, Lincoln found himself going in another direction. He began as a captain, but title and position did him little good. He couldn't overcome the law of influence. By the end of his military service, Abraham Lincoln had found his rightful place, having achieved the rank of private. Fortunately for Lincoln and for the fate of the United States, he overcame his inability to influence others. Lincoln followed his time in the military with undistinguished stints in the Illinois state legislature and the U.S. House of Representatives, but over time and with much effort and personal experience, he became a person of remarkable influence and impact, and later one of the nation's finest presidents. I love the leadership proverb that says, "He who thinks he leads but has no followers is only taking a walk." If you can't influence people, then they will not follow you. And if people won't follow you, you are not a leader. That's the law of influence. No matter what anybody says or whatever somebody may tell you, remember that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And that is chapter 2, the law of influence, from 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.